The morning sky on Kepler 442b should have been blue, but today it looked red. 3 massive ships hung in the air like dark clouds that never moved. They had been there for 3 months now, and Park Min-ho knew they would stay until everyone on the planet was dead or captured. Park Min-ho stood at the window of his office in the colony's main building. He was the governor of this small world, responsible for 50,000 people who had come here to build new lives. Most of them were Korean families who had left Earth 20 years ago, looking for a peaceful place to raise their children and mine the valuable metals hidden in the planet's rocks. Now those same people looked to him for answers he did not have. Knock came at his door. "Come in," he said without turning around. Dr. Kim Nari entered the room. She was the colony's head scientist, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and hands that were always dirty from working with machines. Her lab coat had small burn marks from her latest experiments. "Any luck with the communication system?" Park Min-ho asked. Kim Nari shook her head. "The aliens are still blocking everything. Every time I try to send a message to the Federation, their ships stop it. It's like they have a wall around our entire planet." Park Min-ho turned to face her. "What about the emergency beacon?" "I've been working on it for weeks. Lee Ji-won has been helping me. But we need more power. The main generator is already running at maximum, just to keep the lights on and the air clean." Lee Ji-won was Kim Nari's assistant, a young man who was good with electronics. He had been working day and night to help her, rarely sleeping or eating. Many people in the colony were like that now, too worried to rest, too scared to stop working. "How much food do we have left?" Park Min-ho asked. "Commander Choi says maybe 2 months if we keep rationing. The children get full meals, but the adults are eating half portions." Park Min-ho nodded. Commander Choi Hyun-woo was in charge of the colony's defense force. He was a former soldier who had come to the planet for a quiet retirement, but now he was their military leader. His small team of 200 volunteers was all that stood between the colonists and the alien invaders. The aliens called themselves the Vorthons. They looked like walking crystals, tall and sharp, with voices that sounded like glass breaking. Their technology was far beyond anything humans had ever seen. Their ships could destroy cities with single shots, and their soldiers wore armor that could stop any weapon the colonists had. "What do they want?" Park Min-ho asked, though he had asked this question many times before. "Yoon Tae-hyung thinks he knows," Kim Nari said. "He found something in the deep mines yesterday." Yoon Tae-hyung worked in the mining operations. He spent his days deep underground, digging through rock and stone to find the metals that made the colony valuable. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke unless he had something important to say. What did he find? Strange crystals. They glow with their own light and give off energy readings I've never seen before. He thinks they might be connected to the Vorthon technology. Park Min-ho felt a cold feeling in his stomach. "You mean that's why they're here? For these crystals?" It would make sense. The Vorthons have never attacked a human colony before. Why start with us, unless we have something they want? A loud sound came from outside. Park Min-ho and Kim Nari rushed to the window and saw a Vorthon scout ship flying low over the main street. It was small compared to the big ships in orbit, but still large enough to carry 50 soldiers. The ship moved slowly, like a predator watching its prey. People on the street ran for cover. Children cried as their parents carried them into buildings. The ship's weapons glowed with blue light, but it did not fire. It never fired during these daily flights. The Vorthons seemed content to watch and wait. "They're playing with us," Kim Nari said with anger in her voice. "No," Park Min-ho replied. "They're studying us, learning our patterns, our weaknesses. When they're ready, they'll strike." The scout ship completed its circle and flew back toward the mountains where the main Vorthon base had been built. The aliens had landed there on the first day and built their camp with amazing speed. Their machines had carved through solid rock like it was soft clay, creating a fortress that could not be attacked. Commander Choi Hyun-woo appeared in the doorway. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of military service. His uniform was clean but worn, and he carried a rifle that looked ancient compared to Vorthon weapons. "Governor, we need to talk," he said. The 3 of them sat around Park Min-ho's desk. Maps of the colony covered the surface, marked with red circles showing Vorthon positions and blue lines showing the colonists' defenses. My scouts report increased activity at their base, Commander Choi said. More ships have been landing. They're bringing in heavy equipment. What kind of equipment? Park Min-ho asked. Mining machines, big ones, and weapons platforms that could level this entire city. Kim Nari leaned forward. If they're bringing mining equipment, it confirms what Yoon Tae-hyung found. They're here for the crystals. Which means they'll need to dig, Commander Choi continued. And we're sitting on top of their mining site. The meaning was clear. The Vorthons had been waiting because they needed the colonists out of the way before they could start their work. Soon they would stop playing games and start killing. How long do we have? Park Min-ho asked. Commander Choi looked at his maps. Days, maybe a week. My people have been preparing defensive positions in the tunnels under the city. We can't stop them, but we can make them pay for every meter. What about evacuation? To where? They control the sky. Any ship that tries to leave gets shot down. Park Min-ho stood up and walked to his window again. In the distance, he could see families working in their small gardens, trying to grow enough food to survive. Children played in the streets despite the danger, because children needed to play even when the world was ending. Has anyone tried to contact the Federation? He asked. Every day, Kim Nari replied. But the Vorthons jam all our communications. Even if we could get a message through, help would take months to arrive. The nearest Federation fleet is 6 sectors away. Commander Choi gathered his maps. Governor, my people are ready to fight. We won't win, but we won't go quietly either. After Commander Choi left, Park Min-ho and Kim Nari sat in silence. Outside, the red sky was getting darker as evening approached. The Vorthon ships hung motionless, waiting like vultures. Do you think anyone knows we're here? Kim Nari asked quietly. Park Min-ho thought about Earth, the planet where he had been born. It was so far away now, separated by years of space travel and countless star systems. Did anyone there remember the colonists who had left to build new worlds? Did anyone care what happened to them? I don't know, he said honestly. But we can't count on rescue. We have to find our own way through this. Kim Nari nodded and stood to leave. I'll keep working on the communication system. Maybe I can find a way to punch through their jamming. And I'll talk to the council about rationing. We need to make our supplies last as long as possible. That night, Park Min-ho did not sleep. He walked through the quiet streets of his colony, seeing the lights and windows where families huddled together. Guards patrolled with their simple weapons, brave people who knew they faced impossible odds but refused to give up. In the deep mines, Yoon Tae-hyung worked by himself, studying the strange crystals that might hold the key to their survival. Above ground, Lee Ji-won helped Kim Nari rebuild their communication equipment for the 100th time, hoping this attempt would be different. They were alone on a distant world, forgotten by the galaxy, facing an enemy they could not defeat. But they were still human, and humans did not surrender easily. They would fight with mining tools and farming equipment if they had to. They would protect their children and their homes until the very end. The Vorthon ships watched from above, patient and silent. But they did not know what they were dealing with. They saw only a small colony with weak weapons and old machines. They did not see the determination in human hearts or the creativity that came from desperation. The siege of Kepler 442b had begun, and nobody knew how it would end. 6 months had passed since the Vorthons first appeared in the sky above Kepler 442b. The red glow from their ships had become as familiar as sunrise to the colonists below. What had once caused panic now barely made people look up from their daily struggle to survive. Han Soo-jin walked through the medical center, checking on her patients. As the colony's chief medical officer, she had seen the slow deterioration of her people. Malnutrition was spreading despite their best efforts to ration food fairly. Children were getting sick more often, and adults moved more slowly each day. Doctor, Han, called a weak voice from one of the beds. She turned to see Mrs. Song, an elderly woman who had been one of the first colonists to arrive on the planet. Her family had built a small farm on the outskirts of town, growing vegetables in the alien soil. Now she lay thin and pale, her body giving up the fight to stay healthy. "How are you feeling today?" Han Sujin asked, checking the woman's pulse. "I keep thinking about my garden," Mrs. Song whispered. "The tomatoes should be ripe by now, but I haven't been able to tend them in weeks." Han Sujin knew the farm had been abandoned when Vorthon patrols started venturing closer to the outer settlements. Many families had been forced to move into the town center, crowding into buildings that were never meant to hold so many people. "When this is over, you'll have the best garden on the planet," Han Sujin said with a smile she did not feel. Mrs. Song squeezed her hand. "Do you really think help will come?" The question hung in the air. Han Sujin had no answer that would not be a lie. In the government building, Park Min-ho sat with his emergency council. The faces around the table showed the strain of 6 months under siege. Kim Nari had dark circles under her eyes from working 18-hour days. Commander Choi's hair had turned completely gray. Even young Lee Ji-won looked older, his boyish face marked by worry and exhaustion. "Food supplies?" Park Min-ho asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we cut rations again," Commander Choi replied. "But people are already weak. Cut them more and we'll start losing colonists to starvation." "The hydroponic farms?" Kim Nari shook her head. "We're growing as much as we can, but it's not enough. We need protein, and we can't raise livestock in underground facilities." Park Min-ho turned to Lee Ji-won. "What about power?" "The main reactor is holding, but barely. We've had to shut down non-essential systems. No more hot water, no heating except in essential areas. The air recycling system is working at minimum capacity. The situation was getting worse every day." Park Min-ho knew they were approaching a decision he had hoped never to make. Soon, they would have to choose between fighting to the death or surrendering to save whatever lives they could. "Governor," Commander Choi said quietly. "The Vorthons sent another message yesterday." Everyone at the table grew still. The alien invaders had been sending the same message every week for 2 months. Surrender unconditionally, and some colonists would be allowed to live as workers in the Vorthon mining operation. "Same terms?" Park Min-ho asked. "Same terms. They want us to gather in the main square with no weapons. They'll select who lives and who dies." Kim Nari slammed her hand on the table. "We can't trust them. Once we surrender, they'll do whatever they want with us. And if we don't surrender, we all die anyway," Lee Ji-won said softly. "At least this way some might survive." The room fell silent. Everyone knew Lee Ji-won was thinking about his younger sister, who worked in the colony's school. She was only 19 with her whole life ahead of her. If surrender could save her, was it worth the cost? "I need time to think," Park Min-ho said, finally. As the meeting ended, Commander Choi stayed behind. He waited until the others had left before speaking. "Governor, there's something else. My scouts have detected new activity at the Vorthon base." "What kind of activity?" "They're bringing down more equipment. Heavy mining machines, the kind used for large-scale excavation. And something else. Military hardware. Battle mechs." Park Min-ho felt his heart sink. Battle mechs were massive war machines, each one capable of destroying entire city blocks. If the Vorthons were bringing those down from orbit, it meant they were preparing for their final assault. "How long do we have?" "Days, maybe less." That evening, Park Min-ho walked through the underground tunnels that had become home to most of the colonists. Families had created small living spaces using blankets and salvaged furniture. Children played quiet games while their parents worked on whatever tasks kept the community functioning. He found Yoon Tae-hyung in the deepest part of the mines, studying the strange crystals that glowed with their own inner light. The miner had become obsessed with understanding these alien formations, believing they held the key to the Vorthons' interest in their world. "Any progress?" Park Min-ho asked. Yoon Tae-hyung looked up from his instruments. His face was dirty with rock dust, but his eyes were bright with excitement. "Governor, these crystals are incredible. They respond to human brain waves in ways I've never seen before. When I concentrate on them, they pulse with energy. It's like they're alive." "What does that mean?" "I'm not sure yet. But Dr. Kim thinks The crystals might interfere with Vorthan technology somehow. Their ships and weapons seemed to be based on similar crystalline structures. Park Min-ho studied the glowing formations. Could these beautiful but alien crystals be their salvation? Or were they simply the reason the Vorthans wanted to destroy the colony? "Keep working on it," he said. "We need any advantage we can get." The next morning brought devastating news. Commander Choi burst into Park Min-ho's office with his face pale and his hands shaking. "They're coming," he said simply. Through the window, they could see movement on the horizon. Massive shapes were emerging from the Vorthan base, moving across the landscape like metal mountains. The battle mechs were enormous, each one standing 50 meters tall and bristling with weapons that could level buildings. "How many?" Park Min-ho asked. 6 mechs, plus ground troops. Maybe 1,000 soldiers, against Commander Choi's 200 volunteers with mining equipment and hunting rifles. The alarm sirens began to wail across the colony. Families grabbed their emergency supplies and headed for the tunnels. The evacuation plan they had practiced dozens of times was finally being put to use, but everyone knew it was not really a plan for survival. It was just a way to organize their final moments. Lee Ji-won ran through the corridors, helping elderly colonists reach the deeper tunnels. His sister was with a group of children, making sure the youngest ones did not panic. He caught her eye and smiled, trying to give her courage he did not feel. In her lab, Kim Nari worked frantically to send one final message to the galaxy. If they were going to die, someone should know what happened to them. But the Vorthan jamming was stronger than ever, crushing her signal before it could leave the planet's atmosphere. "Dr. Kim," Lee Ji-won appeared in her doorway. "You need to get to the tunnels. The mechs will be here in an hour." "Go ahead," she said without looking up from her equipment. "I need 5 more minutes." The governor ordered everyone to evacuate. Kim Nari turned to face him. "Lee Ji-won, I've been trying to contact the outside galaxy for 6 months. This is our last chance. If I can boost the signal using Yoon Tae-hyung's crystals, maybe someone will hear us." Lee Ji-won looked at the experimental setup she had created, connecting her communication equipment to samples of the glowing crystals. It was dangerous and probably impossible, but it was also their only hope. "I'll help," he said. Together, they worked to align the crystals with the transmission array. The alien formations pulsed with increasing intensity as they drew power from the colony's failing reactor. Warning lights flashed as the system overloaded, but Kim Nari pushed forward. Above ground, Commander Choi positioned his volunteers at strategic points throughout the town. They had improvised explosive devices made from mining charges and barriers, constructed from whatever materials they could find. It would not stop the Vorthan assault, but it might buy time for the civilians to reach safety. The first Vorthan mech appeared at the edge of town, its crystalline armor gleaming in the red, light from the ships above. It moved with surprising grace for something so large, each step shaking the ground and rattling windows throughout the colony. Commander Choi spoke into his radio. "All units, remember the plan. Hit and run. Make them work for every street." Mining charge exploded beneath the lead mech's foot, but the blast barely scratched its armor. The machine's weapons began to glow as it prepared to return fire. In the tunnels below, families huddled together as the sounds of battle reached them through layers of rock and earth. Children cried as the explosions grew louder and closer. Parents held them tight, whispering words of comfort that rang hollow in the underground darkness. Han Soo-jin moved through the tunnel system, treating wounded volunteers who were brought down from the surface. Burns from Vorthan energy weapons, broken bones from falling debris, and the 1,000 small injuries that came from desperate battle. She worked without speaking, focusing on her patients to avoid thinking about what was happening to their world. The battle above was not going well. Commander Choi had lost half his volunteers in the first hour, and the Vorthans had barely slowed down. The alien mechs walked through the colonists' defenses like they were made of paper, their weapons carving through buildings and barriers with equal ease. The tunnels deep beneath Kepler 442b had become a tomb for the living. 2 days had passed since the Vorthan mechs had broken through the colony's defenses, and now the alien soldiers were hunting through the underground passages like predators, seeking wounded prey. Kim Nari crouched in the darkness of her makeshift laboratory, surrounded by the broken remains of her communication equipment. The crystal array that Lee Jiwon had died to protect still glowed softly, but she could no longer tell if it was working. The young man's sacrifice haunted her thoughts as she tried to repair the damage from the recent battles. Commander Choi had lost 3/4 of his volunteers. The survivors moved through the tunnels like ghosts, carrying wounded comrades and what little ammunition they had left. Every few hours, the sound of Vorthon energy weapons would echo through the stone corridors as another pocket of resistance was discovered and eliminated. Park Min-ho sat with the colony's remaining leaders in what had once been a storage room for mining equipment. The space now served as their command center, though they commanded very little beyond their own despair. Maps of the tunnel system covered the walls, marked with red X's, showing where the Vorthons had broken through. "How many people do we have left?" he asked quietly. "Maybe 15,000, Commander Choi replied. "The rest are either dead or captured. The Vorthons are taking some as prisoners, probably to work in their mining operation." Han Sujin looked up from treating a wounded volunteer. "The children are asking when we're going home. What do I tell them?" Nobody had an answer. Home was above their heads, burning under alien occupation. The colony they had spent 20 years building was being torn apart by massive machines that carved through stone and metal like it was soft clay. Yoon Tae-hyung emerged from the deeper tunnels where he had been studying the crystal formations. His clothes were torn and his face was streaked with dirt, but his eyes held a strange excitement. "I've found something," he said. "Something important." He led them through narrow passages carved from living rock, past families huddled around, small fires and children sleeping on blankets spread over the cold stone floor. The deeper they went, the more the walls sparkled with veins of the strange crystals that had drawn the Vorthons to their world. "Look at this," Yoon Tae-hyung said, pointing to a large crystal formation that pulsed with blue-white light. "I've been monitoring these for weeks. They respond to human thoughts, human emotions, but today, something changed." He placed his hand on the crystal surface, and immediately, the entire formation began to glow brighter. Patterns of light raced through the crystalline structure like electricity through wire. "When I concentrate on specific thoughts, the crystals react. When I think about the Vorthans, they pulse faster. When I think about their technology," he focused his mind, and the crystals suddenly flared with brilliant light. Kim Nari stared at the display in wonder. "The resonance frequency is increasing. It's like the crystals are amplifying your neural patterns." "But why?" Park Min-ho asked. Yoon Tae-hyung smiled grimly. "I think these crystals are the reason the Vorthons came here. Their entire technology is based on similar crystalline structures. But there's something special about these formations. They react to human consciousness in ways that might interfere with Vorthon systems." Before anyone could respond, a new sound echoed through the tunnels. Not the harsh crack of Vorthon energy, weapons, but something else. A high-pitched whine that seemed to come from Kim Nari's damaged laboratory. "That's my communication array," she said with surprise. "Something's trying to reach us." They ran through the winding passages as fast as they could, dodging other colonists and jumping over debris from collapsed sections. When they reached the laboratory, Kim Nari's equipment was alive with activity. Lights flashed across her instruments and the crystal array was pulsing with rhythmic energy. "There's a signal coming through," Kim Nari said, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's weak, but it's definitely there." She worked to amplify the incoming transmission, while the others watched anxiously. After several minutes of adjustment, a voice crackled through the static, a human voice speaking Korean. "This is Admiral Kwon Ji-hoo of the Terran Defense Force, calling any survivors on Kepler 442b. Please respond if you can hear this message." The words hit the group like a physical blow. Park Min-ho grabbed the microphone with shaking hands. "This is Governor Park Min-ho of the Kepler 442b colony. Admiral, we're still here, but barely. The Vorthon forces have overrun our surface positions. We have maybe 15,000 civilians trapped in underground tunnels." A pause, filled with static and the distant sound of energy weapons from somewhere above them. "Governor, this is Admiral Kwon. I need you to listen carefully," Earth has not forgotten you. We've been tracking the Vorthon invasion for 8 months, and we're here to get you out. Here, Kimnari whispered. That they're here? Admiral Kwan's voice continued through the crackling transmission. The Vorthons don't know we've arrived. We've been using new stealth technology to approach the system undetected, but we need information about their positions and capabilities before we can act. Commander Choi leaned toward the microphone. Admiral, this is Commander Choi Hyunwoo. The Vorthons have 6 battle mechs on the surface and approximately 1,000 ground troops. Their main base is in the northern mountains, protected by energy shields and automated defense systems. What about their fleet in orbit? 3 heavy cruisers and maybe a dozen smaller vessels. Their weapons are beyond anything we've ever seen. Another pause. When Admiral Kwan spoke again, his voice carried a confidence that seemed impossible given the situation. Commander, you're about to learn something about Earth's military that the rest of the galaxy doesn't know. We've been preparing for this day for a long time. Park Min-ho found his voice. Admiral, with respect, how can Earth's forces challenge the Vorthon Empire? Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. A sound that might have been laughter came through the static. Governor, do you know why other species call us the earthquake species? No, sir. Because we don't fight the way everyone else does. While the galactic powers were building bigger ships and stronger weapons, we were thinking about the problem differently. Sometimes the best way to bring down a giant is not to match its strength, but to find the right place to push. The transmission began to fade as Vorthon jamming systems attempted to block the signal. Admiral Kwan's voice became urgent. Governor, we need you to do something for us. Those crystals your people have been studying. They're the key to everything. We need you to gather as many samples as possible and get them to the surface when we begin our attack. The surface is controlled by the Vorthons, Commander Choi protested. Not for much longer. In exactly 12 hours, every Vorthon system on this planet is going to experience some technical difficulties. That's when you move. Get those crystals to the highest point you can reach, and be ready for extraction. The signal cut off completely as the Vorthon jamming returned to full strength. The laboratory fell silent except for the soft humming of the crystal array and the distant sounds of alien soldiers moving through the tunnels above. 12 hours, Park Min-ho said quietly. Do you think they can really do it? Yoon Tae-hyung was already moving toward the crystal formations. It doesn't matter what we think, this is our only chance. Commander Choi gathered his remaining volunteers. They had barely enough ammunition for one more fight. But if Earth's forces were really coming, they would need to be ready to support the attack. His people had been waiting to die with honor. Now they might have a chance to live with purpose. Han Soo-jin began organizing the medical supplies. If there was going to be a rescue, there would be wounded people who needed immediate treatment. She tried not to think about how many colonists would not live to see Earth ships arrive. As they prepared for whatever was coming, families in the deeper tunnels whispered the news to each other. Earth had not forgotten them. Somewhere above the planet, human ships were moving through the darkness, carrying weapons and warriors who had traveled across the galaxy to save them. Children who had never seen Earth asked their parents what it was like. Old colonists who remembered blue skies and natural sunlight began to cry as they thought about going home. Young adults who had been born on Kepler 442b wondered what it would be like to walk on the world their parents had left behind. But first, they had to survive the next 12 hours. Vorthon patrols were getting closer to their position. The aliens had been systematically searching every tunnel and chamber, using their advanced sensors to detect human life signs. Soon, they would find the main group of survivors, and then it would all be over. Park Min-ho looked at his watch. 11 hours and 43 minutes until Admiral Kwan's promised attack. An eternity when you were hiding in underground tunnels while crystalline monsters hunted you through the darkness. Kim Nari continued monitoring her communication equipment, hoping for another message from the fleet. But the Vorthon jamming was too strong now, and all she could hear was static mixed with the occasional sound of alien voices speaking in their glass-breaking language. Yoon Tae-hyung worked with a team of miners to extract crystal samples from the tunnel walls. The first sign that something was wrong came from orbit. High above Kepler 442b, The three massive Vorthan cruisers that had maintained perfect formation for 8 months suddenly began firing their weapons into empty space. Their energy beams lanced out into the darkness, seeking targets that seemed to exist only in their sensors. Captain Osunho watched the chaos from the bridge of his stealth destroyer as it glided silently between the alien ships. His vessel was small compared to the Vorthan giants, but it carried something the aliens had never encountered: adaptive artificial intelligence that learned and evolved with every passing second. "Target their sensor arrays," he ordered quietly. "Make them blind before they know we're here." Lieutenant Nam Yu-jin piloted her fighter through the space between the massive alien vessels, her ship no bigger than a shuttle compared to the cruisers that surrounded her. Her fighter's weapons were not designed to destroy ships like these. They were designed to hurt them in ways the Vorthans had never imagined. "Beginning electromagnetic pulse attack," she reported over the communication system. Targeting their crystal matrix power cores, her weapons fired, sending precisely tuned energy bursts into the alien ship's most vulnerable systems. Where the Vorthans had built their technology around massive crystalline formations that could generate enormous power, humans had learned to use those same formations against them. The first Vorthan cruiser shuddered as its internal systems began to fail. Navigation, weapons, life support, all of it depended on the delicate balance of energy flowing through crystal networks. And now that balance was being destroyed by weapons that attacked the very foundation of their technology. On the planet's surface, Commander Choi felt the ground shake beneath his feet. At first he thought it was another Vorthan mech moving through the tunnels, but then he realized the vibrations were coming from above. The battle for orbit had begun. "All units, this is it," he spoke into his radio. "Earth forces are engaging the enemy. Prepare for surface assault." His remaining volunteers gathered their weapons and the crystal samples that Yoon Tae-hyung had extracted from the tunnel walls. They had no idea how these alien minerals would help Earth's attack, but Admiral Kwan had said they were essential. Deep in the mines, Park Min-ho led the evacuation of civilians toward the surface tunnels. Families carried their few remaining possessions and helped elderly colonists who could barely walk. Children asked excited questions about the rescue ships, but their parents remained focused on the dangerous journey ahead. "Stay together," Park Min-ho called out as they moved through the narrow passages. "No one gets left behind." Han Soo-jin followed with a team of medical volunteers, carrying supplies to treat the wounded. She had no idea what they would find on the surface, but experience had taught her to prepare for the worst possible scenarios. Above them, the battle was intensifying. Sergeant Bae Min-jae led his Marine unit through the corridors of a Vorthan cruiser, their powered armor allowing them to move through the alien ship like walking earthquakes. Where other species might have tried to match Vorthan technology with similar weapons, humans had developed something entirely different. "Remember your training," Sergeant Bae called to his Marines. "These ships are built around central crystal cores. Disrupt the cores and everything else fails." His team moved with practiced efficiency, placing electromagnetic charges at key points throughout the ship's crystal matrix. Each explosion sent cascading failures through the alien vessel's systems, turning its own power source into a weapon against itself. The Vorthan crew fought back with desperate fury, but their weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat, not close-quarters battle against enemies who moved like living storms through their corridors. Human Marines absorbed damage that would have killed any other species, then kept fighting with the relentless determination that had made them feared throughout the galaxy. In space, the battle was turning into a rout. The Vorthan fleet that had seemed invincible just hours before was now scattered and damaged, their ships drifting powerless as human vessels darted between them like predators finishing wounded prey. "Status report," Admiral Kwan demanded from his flagship. 3 enemy cruisers disabled, 7 smaller vessels destroyed, came the reply. "Our stealth systems are holding. The Vorthans still don't know how many ships we have or where they're coming from." Admiral Kwan smiled grimly. Earth's strategy had been years in the making. While other galactic powers competed to build the largest ships with the most powerful weapons, human engineers had focused on mobility, stealth, and weapons designed specifically to exploit Vorthan weaknesses. The result was a fleet that could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and disappear before the enemy could respond effectively. It was not the way most species fought wars, but humans had never done things the way other species expected. On the planet's surface, the Vorthan ground forces were experiencing their own problems. The 6 massive battle mechs that had terrorized the colonists for days were suddenly stumbling like drunk giants, their systems failing as the quantum crystal network that powered them began to collapse. Yoon Tae-hyung watched from a tunnel entrance as one of the mechs crashed into a building, its pilot apparently unable to control the machine's movements. "The resonance cascade is working," he said with excitement. "The human neural patterns from our crystal samples are interfering with their technology." Kim Nari monitored the effect on her rebuilt communication equipment. "The interference is spreading through their entire network. Every Vorthon system on the planet is being affected." It was exactly what Admiral Kwan had predicted. The Vorthons had built their technology around crystalline matrices that were incredibly powerful, but also vulnerable to the right kind of interference. And humans, it turned out, generated exactly the right kind of interference. Commander Choi led his volunteers out of the tunnels and into the chaos of the surface battle. Vorthan soldiers were scattered across the colony, many of them struggling with weapons and equipment that no longer functioned properly. Their crystalline armor, once impervious to human weapons, was now flickering and failing as the quantum interference spread. "Now we fight back," Commander Choi said, raising his rifle. What followed was not really a battle. It was revenge. For 8 months, the colonists had been helpless victims, watching their world burn while hiding in underground tunnels. Now, they emerged into daylight with weapons in their hands and fury in their hearts. Vorthan soldiers who had seemed invincible just hours before found themselves fighting desperate defensive actions against miners and farmers armed with improvised weapons. The aliens' superior technology meant nothing when it refused to work properly, and their crystalline physiology made them vulnerable to the electromagnetic weapons that human engineers had developed specifically for this war. Park Min-ho reached the surface with the first group of evacuees and saw something he had never expected to witness: human dropships descending from orbit, their hulls marked with the flag of Earth. The vessels moved with impossible grace, using technology that seemed almost magical compared to the colony's simple machines. "This is Dropship 7 calling Governor Park," a voice crackled over his radio. "We're here to take you home." The pilot was Major Song Hana, a woman who spoke with the accent of Earth's northern provinces. She had traveled across half the galaxy to rescue people she had never met, simply because they were human and they needed help. "Governor, we're setting up an extraction zone at your main landing field," she reported. "Get your people there as fast as you can. We have medical facilities standing by." Han Sujin organized the evacuation of wounded colonists, working with Earth medical teams who brought equipment and supplies that seemed miraculous after months of rationing. Children who had been slowly starving were given real food for the first time in weeks. Elderly colonists who had given up hope were loaded onto transport ships that would carry them back to the world of their birth. The extraction continued throughout the day as more Earth ships arrived to carry the survivors to safety. But the rescue operation was only part of Admiral Kwan's mission. His real objective was to send a message to the galaxy that humanity would never abandon its people. Lieutenant Nam Yujin landed her fighter on the main street of the colony, its engines still warm from the space battle above. She climbed out of her cockpit and was immediately surrounded by children who had never seen a human military pilot before. "Are you really from Earth?" asked a little girl whose family had lived on Kepler 442b for 3 generations. "I am," Nam Yujin replied, kneeling down to the child's level. "And so are you, all of you. No matter how far from home you travel, you're still human, and that means you're never really alone." By evening, the last of the Vorthon forces had been eliminated or captured. Their mighty fleet was either destroyed or drifting powerless in orbit, victims of human weapons they had never imagined possible. The ground forces that had terrorized the colony for months had been routed by farmers and miners, fighting with tools and determination. Commander Choi stood in the ruins of his colony's main square, watching Earth ships land to collect the last group of evacuees. 3 months after the rescue of Kepler 442b, The galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. The Vorthan Empire, which had dominated galactic politics for over 1,000 years, was in chaos. Their fleets were scattered, their worlds in rebellion, and their technology had been proven vulnerable to human weapons that seemed to come from nowhere. Park Min-ho stood on the observation deck of Earth Station 1, watching ships from dozens of worlds dock at the massive space station that orbited humanity's home planet. He had never imagined he would see Earth again, but here he was, looking down at the blue and green world where his species had been born. "It's beautiful," said Kim Nari, joining him at the viewport. "I had forgotten how blue the oceans are." She looked different now, healthier and stronger after months of proper food and medical care. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, and her hands no longer shook from exhaustion and malnutrition. But the experience of the siege had changed her, as it had changed all the survivors. "Have you decided what you want to do?" Park Min-ho asked. Kim Nari nodded toward the research facilities visible on the station's lower levels. "Admiral Kwan has offered me a position with the Xenoarchaeology Division. They want to study the quantum crystals we brought back from Kepler 442b. The crystals had proven to be more than just minerals. They were a form of naturally occurring quantum computer that could interface with conscious thought. Human thought specifically. Other species could not activate them, but humans could use them to disrupt Vorthan technology and power their own advanced systems. "What about you?" Kim Nari asked. Park Min-ho was quiet for a moment, watching a sleek Earth cruiser maneuver toward one of the docking bays. "They've offered me a position in the Colonial Affairs Ministry. Someone needs to coordinate the evacuation of other vulnerable colonies before the Vorthans regroup." The rescue of Kepler 442b had been just the beginning. Earth's fleets were now moving to protect every human settlement in the galaxy, whether they were official colonies or small groups of families who had simply decided to make their homes among the stars. Commander Choi Hyun-woo walked onto the observation deck wearing the uniform of Earth's Naval Defense Force. The insignia on his collar showed his new rank, Captain. His hair was still gray, but his posture was straighter and his eyes held a confidence that had been missing during the siege. "The briefing is starting in 10 minutes, he said. "Admiral Kwan wants all the Kepler survivors to attend." They made their way through the station's corridors, passing diplomats and military officers from across the galaxy. Earth Station 1 had become the center of a new kind of galactic politics, where humanity was no longer seen as a minor species seeking acceptance. The briefing room was filled with familiar faces. Han Sujin sat near the front, now wearing the uniform of Earth's Medical Corps. Yoon Tae-hyung was there with a team of scientists who had been studying his discoveries about the quantum crystals. Even some of the children from the colony were present, now living on Earth but still part of the community that had survived the siege together. Admiral Kwan entered the room and everyone stood at attention. He was still the same steady man who had risked everything to save them, but now he wore additional insignia showing his promotion to Fleet Admiral of Earth's Galactic Defense Force. "Please sit down," he said. "We have a lot to discuss." He activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked Vorthan-controlled space, which had shrunk dramatically since the battle at Kepler 442b. Blue zones showed human territory, which had expanded as Earth's fleets moved to protect scattered colonies. "The Vorthan Empire is collapsing," Admiral Kwan began. "Our victory at Kepler 442b has inspired rebellions on dozens of their worlds. Species that have been enslaved for centuries are rising up, using the quantum disruption technology we've shared with them." He touched a control, and the display zoomed in on specific star systems. But the Vorthans are not finished. They're gathering their remaining fleets for what they call the final Crystal War. Intelligence suggests they plan to destroy Earth itself rather than accept defeat. The room grew quiet. Everyone understood the implications. Earth had saved them, but now Earth itself was in danger because of what they had accomplished. "That's why we're here," Admiral Kwan continued. "Earth needs every advantage we can get, and you survivors have knowledge and experience that could make the difference." Yoon Tae-hyung stood up. "Admiral, I've been working with your scientists on weaponizing the quantum crystals. We think we can create disruption fields powerful enough to disable entire Vorthan fleets. How long would that take? 6 months, maybe less if we can get access to more crystal samples. Admiral Kwan nodded. Captain Choi, how soon can you have a colonial defense force ready for deployment? Commander Choi, now Captain Choi, checked his notes. We have 5,000 volunteers from Kepler 442b and other rescued colonies. Most of them have combat experience against Vorthan forces. Give me 3 months for training and equipment, and they'll be ready. Han Sujin raised her hand. What? About medical support? If there's going to be a major war, we'll need field hospitals and trauma centers throughout human space. Already being constructed, Admiral Kwan replied. But we need experienced personnel to staff them, people who know how to treat Vorthan weapon injuries. The briefing continued for 2 hours as they planned humanity's response to the coming war. But Park Min-ho found his thoughts drifting to something Admiral Kwan had said at the beginning. This was no longer about survival. This was about what kind of galaxy they wanted to live in. After the meeting, Park Min-ho walked through the station's civilian areas, where families from Kepler 442b were building new lives. Children played in gardens that reminded them of home, while adults worked at jobs that used skills they had learned on their distant colony. He found Lee Ji-won's sister, Su Young, working in one of the engineering departments. She was designing communication systems for the new human colonies, using lessons learned from her brother's sacrifice during the siege. Do you ever think about going back? Park Min-ho asked her. Su Young paused in her work. To Kepler 442b? Sometimes. But I think Ji-won would want me to help build something better, instead of just trying to recreate what we lost. She was right, Park Min-ho realized. The colony they had built on Kepler 442b was gone, but something larger had taken its place. Humanity was no longer scattered groups of settlers hoping to be left alone among the stars. They were becoming something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that would cross any distance to protect their own. Later that day, Park Min-ho attended a meeting with Ambassador Shin Young-soo, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. The ambassador was preparing for what many expected to be the most important diplomatic session in galactic history. The other species are scared, Ambassador Shin explained. For 1,000 years, the Vorthans have been the dominant power. Now that we've proven they can be defeated, everyone is trying to figure out what comes next. What do we want to come next? Park Min-ho asked. Ambassador Shin smiled. That's the question, isn't it? Earth could try to replace the Vorthans as the galaxy's dominant power. We have the military strength now, and the technology to back it. But that's not who we are. Humans don't conquer for the sake of conquest. We explore, we build, we protect our families and help our neighbors. The next day, Ambassador Shin addressed the Galactic Council from Earth Station 1. Representatives from hundreds of worlds listened as he outlined humanity's vision for the future. Not an empire built on domination, but a community based on mutual protection and shared prosperity. Earth makes this promise to every species in the galaxy, he said. We will never abandon our people no matter how far they travel or how dangerous the situation becomes. But we also promise that we will extend that same protection to anyone who asks for our help. The speech sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. Some species saw it as a threat, but others saw it as the hope they had been waiting for. Within weeks, dozens of worlds were requesting Earth's protection, offering to join what the media was calling the Human Alliance. Park Min-ho watched these developments from his new office in the Colonial Affairs Ministry. His job was to coordinate the expansion of human space, but he found himself thinking more about the children who would grow up in this new galaxy. On Kepler 442b, those children had learned that home could be taken away without warning. Here on Earth and its allied worlds, they were learning something different. That home was not a place, but a promise. The promise that no human would ever stand alone against the darkness. Yoon Tae-hyung's research had revealed something amazing about the quantum crystals. They didn't just respond to human consciousness, they seemed to be shaped by it. The more humans worked with them, the more powerful and sophisticated they became. as if the crystals were learning from their users. It's like they want to help us, Yoon Tae-hyung explained during one of his reports. The crystals aren't just tools, they're partners. This discovery led to breakthroughs in faster-than-light communication, defensive shields, and weapons that could disable enemy ships without destroying them.